Let me turn on the recording. But today we have with us Chris Olszewski. Chris, am I saying that right?
That's perfect.
Thank you. Chris is a professor at the Savannah School of Art and Design and a Chippewa artist. I met Chris a few years ago at an event at the McKissick Museum as part of a panel there, and have been wanting to bring him to Lancaster to the Native American Studies Center for some time. We had planned on doing that this year. Unfortunately, nature had other plans for us, but we have the next best thing. We have him joining us virtually here. We're delighted to have Chris join us and to tell us about the work that he's been doing. And I think you'll all be interested in this, and we'll take questions at the end. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Chris Olszewski. Chris.
All right, fantastic. Well, here's the first slide for you. So it's hello. And thank you everyone for attending, coming out today. This is No Active Warrants lecture. And also special thanks to Stephen for communicating with me over these years and keeping in touch, and then bringing me in for today's lecture. Also, thank you to the Native American Studies Center, as well as the University of South Carolina, Lancaster. So it's quite an honor to be here. My name is Christopher Olszewski. I'm professor, School of Foundation Studies at Savannah College of Art and Design. Here's my website if you want to see some more of my projects that I have going on, or in the future kind of just keep up with what I have. At the end of the lecture, I have a slide too that has repeated information here with my website and my social media. So a little background information. This is my Indian certificate of Indian status. Just want to let you know I'm legit. So this is a picture of me from back in the day. I do know that it is an old image, but I like to keep it. This is back when I was young, thin, full head of hair. That's when I had life in my eyes, so I just want to, all right, I already get some technical difficulties here. Hold on a second. Here we go. So here is my certificate of Indian status. I have a funny last name for being a Chippewa. So I'm half Polish and half Chippewa. So my grandfather was displaced by the wars in Europe, most specifically Poland, and moved to the lovely city of Detroit in the 1920s. He has quite a story as far as leaving this kind of war-torn kind of area, jumping on a few boats, making his way to Cleveland, and then finally to Detroit. He never spoke English, so I always think that is pretty interesting as far as moving to America. My mother left the Arama First Nations Indian Reservation in 1949 and to move with family in the city of Detroit. So here's Detroit, roughly 1950. That's when my mom and dad met. So I have a friend of mine, Richard Liu. He is half Chinese, half Mexican. And we were hanging out one day in Memphis, and I said to him, Richard, how the heck does that happen? Half Chinese, half Mexican. And he never answered me. So a couple years went by. Him and I were hanging out in Los Angeles, where he was originally from. Him and I were in a rental car going down the road. And then right in the middle of our conversation, he just stops the car and he goes, Mexican town, Chinatown. That's how it happens. And I was like, oh yeah, no shit. That's exactly what happened to me. So if you look here, this is Michigan Avenue. One side where the Native Americans hung out. The other side is where the Polacks hung out. They all worked in the factories. They all went to the bars and hung out in this area. And so next thing you know, here I am. So this is the lovely city of Detroit. This is a photograph before freeways. So the landscape of the city is slightly different today. A little artistic background. I did a project a few years ago called No Place for the Weak. I wrote a grant, and I got the grant, and I bought a Jeep Cherokee. It wasn't anything too fancy. It was a 1992 Jeep Cherokee with a few mechanical problems, but I retraced the Trail of Tears. So here's a picture of the Jeep Cherokee in use. So yes, I followed the Trail of Tears. The Jeep Cherokee, I'm sorry, here we go. So I started off in New Echota here in Georgia, and I made my way all the way out to Tahlequah. So on the way, I recorded sounds That's the main component of the project was recording sound. So I was just going to different locations, different spaces of atrocities, and kind of collecting the sound of the space, and then kind of reusing that as a platform for data for a series of projects. But I was really amazed by how much the trail is actually marked. There's lots of indicators. So I was just kind of driving this vehicle right along with it. One thing with this vehicle here, it makes a connection with the lovely city of Detroit and the state of Georgia that I'm living in. I'm always trying to find these kinds of connections. I'm a displaced northerner living in the South. So I'm always looking for some way to make these kinds of connections. The Jeep is assembled in Detroit. Well, I like to think of by Polish folk like myself. So it has this kind of blend between the Polish world and also the Native American world. Jeep Cherokee is named obviously after the Cherokee people that once occupied the Georgia landscape. So I have this vehicle here. It needed some repair. It leaked oil, transmission fluid, and coolant. So it had the trifecta. It was my wife did not like this sitting in front of the house. I spent a lot of time working on it, getting it ready for the road. I didn't spend too much money on it, so that was a good thing. And so I was able to spend some cash as far as getting it road ready. It would leak all of this fluid and it would be all over the concrete and stuff. So I had a great solution. I said, I'm going to put some paper down. And I think that infuriated my wife even more because, yeah, now we got this big giant piece of leaky, I'm sorry, piece of paper soaking in all the different leaks. But anyway, I had this sitting out here and I would use it for kind of a drop cloth. It would collect the fluids from the car and kind of lay out these different patterns onto the paper itself. I'm a recovering Catholic, so I'm still, have this kind of hardwiring in the brain about the body and blood of Christ. So we have this kind of ceremonies within the Catholic Church where you're drinking the blood and you're drinking or eating the body of Christ. So I was thinking about that as I was putting this down. So this was like collecting the blood or collecting the juices from this vehicle. So this is post surgery. I had to work on the transmission. I am not a mechanic, nor do I play one on TV or anything else. But I have basic skills as far as how a vehicle functions. So I took the transmission apart. There was some heavy leakage going on, and so I had to take it apart and put it back together. So I took this photograph here of the post surgery. It was successful. So anyway, so what I was doing, I was taking the pieces of paper and I would let it dry and then put it into the studio space and I would start drawing on top of it. So the paper itself has the essence of the vehicle on it while I'm drawing the vehicle or thinking about the different stories that I collected from my trip. So going back into the studio space here and being able to, to really push around my ideas. So here's a couple of examples of what the work looks like. We know what's best for you. That's what I kind of thought about as far as being forcefully removed from your place. So we know what's best for you. And so, so I used a variety of different materials. I used felt markers, motor oil, transmission fluid, coolant on paper with political signs. So much like the time that we live in right now with this political season it just passed, I go out and I collect all the old political signs that are kind of left behind. And then what I'll do is I'll repurpose them and make them into a painting. So underneath the paper itself is these political signs. I also modify the surface of the paper. So you get the torch out and I'm able to kind of burn the surface to get different textures and different variety. As you can see, safety first. I have a little squirt bottle in the background there just in case things get out of control. I'm able to kind of squirt and get things back in order. So here's a few of my drawings too, based on my travels through the Trail of Tears. This Cherokee was on the side of the road in Arkansas, and I was driving along in my little car. And next thing you know, I saw it, and I absolutely had to stop. It like called out to me. I stopped, went over, and I spent about a half hour taking photographs, videotaping, and also setting up my sound equipment and gathering up the different wind and nature that's around it. So I went in and I also created a series of drawings. This is one of the drawings here. This is also on political signs of this piece. One thing that I've learned for you artists that are out there, when you make a large painting, let's say an 8-foot by 4-foot painting, and somebody wants that painting to exhibit, you have to pay for shipping, just to let you know. I didn't realize this when I was a young man and I was making these large paintings, and New York called, and this gallery that was in Chelsea and said, "Hey, we really like your paintings." And I'm thinking to myself on the phone, please God, baby Jesus, pick the small paintings, pick the small paintings. At the time, I didn't have much cash to say the least. And I was like, oh, sweet Jesus, make sure it's a small painting. Nope, they wanted the 4-foot by 8-foot painting. It cost me over $1,000 to ship that painting. And that was the last time I made a large 8-foot by 4-foot painting. What I do now is I make them in smaller sections. Consider it like tiling. So I had these different sections with a painting that's this large, which is roughly, I'm not sure what 180 by 40 inches is off the top of my head, but it's a relatively large painting. But I can break it down to 18 by 24 inches, wrap it up, and I can ship it anywhere in the country for about $25. So I learned my lesson when I was young. Hopefully I can pass that information on to creative people that are out there just to make your life that much easier. So I can tile these together and I can have them on the wall. I can break it down relatively easily, wrap it up, and again, ship it on to the next locations. So this is Drive Me to Drinking. As you can see, the circles from the previous slide, I use a Miller High Life can as a template to kind of make these circles. Beer, I found, is a bridge between the two cultures I'm a part of. So when I go into a Polish gathering, the first thing somebody does is they hand you a beer. You open the beer, you sit down, and all of a sudden you become a part of the energy that's going on within the room. Same with going up to the reservation. You walk into a house, the first thing they do is hand you a beer, you open it up, you sit down, and you become a part of the energy. So I definitely see this beer as a cultural bridge between these two worlds that I occupy. Let's see, road trips are in my blood. So I've been working on them for a little over 10 years now. I'm trying to incorporate traveling into my creative process. So these are road trips are in my blood. This is a 1970s style road trip. This is not my real family, but it just gives you an idea of what was going on back in the 70s. Important road trips for me. In 1978, my family did a road trip from Detroit to Denver. Me and my brother sat in the back of a pickup truck. So for those of you who have not lived through the 1970s and a little bit into the 80s, you're really missing out. My dad, because we lived in the lovely city of Detroit, had snow tires on the back of his pickup truck. So from Detroit to Denver, the whole thing just vibrated. So all the way there, we vibrated. So once we got out of the truck, it's just like, blah, 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 blah. So that was a really fun experience. I think Guantanamo Bay uses very similar kind of techniques when trying to get information from detainees. I didn't know any better. I just figured that's what everybody does. You just get back of a truck that vibrates for like two solid days. Anyway, in 1982, we did another family road trip, same truck, but we drove from Detroit to Vancouver. This time my dad bought a camper. It was very similar to this big camper, me, my cousin, my mom and dad, and I think an aunt and somebody else was thrown in there too. And so we had this huge truck, and it got roughly 6 miles to the gallon. So every 15, 25 minutes, we're stopping to fill up with gasoline. In 1996, I did a personal road trip to look at 18 different MFA programs. My professor gave me a word of advice. He said, look at an MFA program. What you have to do is go and visit. Everybody looks good in their brochure, that kind of a thing, but you got to go and see it. So I was like, all right. So I scraped up some money. I had my Crown Victoria, mapped out this project very similar to what I'm doing now, and going on a road trip to go see what these schools look like. Also 2000 to present, various vision quests and spiritual journeys. Oops, here we go. I've been interested in car covers also. It's which you'll see in some of the work. This is where I got my idea. My father-in-law gives me, he's a non-artist. He gives me a, subscription to a National Geographic. I really enjoy the images, the articles, kind of looking through it. And the subscription comes in. I'm sitting there minding my own business. I get the magazine, I open it up, and I see this page. And I've been trying to figure out, let's say, with the Jeep, how do I, connect with the community? How can I have people, let's say, write on the car without being that art guy that's driving around with Legos all over his car? I don't want to be that guy. But how can I have it where the surface connects with people? Maybe I could switch it in and out. I was thinking about different vinyl, but that's relatively expensive, especially at that time. So I saw this article. I was like, oh my God, this is Gerd Ludwig. He takes photographs of napping or sleeping cars all through Los Angeles. And so as soon as I saw this, I said, that's a perfect idea. And then I went on to design some car covers that go over the vehicles. And that really is allows me to be able to connect with different communities. So roughly 2016 to today, I have some projects that I have going on. This is the vehicle. This is a 1998 Cadillac DeVille. So it's, let's see, so why a Cadillac? Well, this is my mother and father. This is back in 1955, and my father and his father absolutely loved Cadillacs. Cadillacs were the quintessential car to have. My dad never owned a Cadillac, but it's just something that was always this kind of high level, talked about them. We had friends that worked at the plant and things like that. So it was always this kind of, oh man, look at that Cadillac. Wouldn't that be nice? That kind of a thing. So Cadillac has always been a part of the conversation. Also, Cadillac is one of the last remaining vehicles to be built in Detroit. At this time, I contacted a woman named Mary Barra. I'm not sure if you know who she is. She is the CEO of General Motors. There is a rumor that she reads every one of her emails. So I don't know how that's possible. I get a crazy amount of emails, and I'm really a nobody. I couldn't imagine being the CEO of a large corporation like General Motors. But anyway, a friend of mine said, yeah, she reads all of her emails. Send her an email. Talk to her about your project. I was like, okay. So I did. If there's another piece of advice I can give to people, take opportunities. Send this email. Send out this message. Whatever you can do. Make connections with people. Don't be afraid. What I did was I sent her an email. I gave her my brief of what I was working on. I'm coming to Detroit. And yeah, I sent it out and I did not get a response. That's fine. That's why I kind of figured. But what I did was, what was magic is I sent a second one out. I sent a second one out. In about 2 days, I received a message back from her. And she said, this is a fantastic project. I absolutely love it. And then she put me in connection with several people within the organization. So I was able to do 3 things while I visited Detroit. I went to the plant right here. This is the Detroit Hamtramck assembly plant. I went and visited this plant. I had a 3.5 hour tour of the facilities. I was able to walk completely through there, and it was absolutely wonderful. The other thing was I was able to see the archives, General Motors archives, everything all the way back from the beginning of General Motors to today. And also I was able to see the Heritage Museum that is a private General Motors run museum of all the cars that were ever built by General Motors. It is absolutely fantastic. I was able to spend an entire day going through and looking at car designs, taking as many pictures as I wanted to. And then that information has gone on to helping me with other images and creative projects. But anyway, so here's the car here. Anyway, I bought this car from an old dude. That was kind of my my method of operation as far as buying used vehicles. Find an old dude, you know it's going to be taken care of. You got a pretty good shot of getting a good vehicle. So I went down to Jacksonville, Florida, bought it off this old dude here, and then things got complicated. I knew going into buying a Cadillac DeVille, especially this year, that these engines are notorious for having head gasket issues. Essentially, the oil goes into the gas, and then the gas goes into the coolant, and then the coolant goes into the oil. Yeah, it's really fun. And that's exactly what it was doing. Yeah, so I knew it going into it, but I still took the gamble. I bought this car, and we had some issues. essentially I bought a $2,200 chicken coop. So this could be what I could put in my front yard here. I have a few chickens out there. Maybe this is a design. These are some other creative options I could have done with the car. Yeah, I could have made a little chicken coop out in front of my house. My wife would have loved it, and yeah, we would have been fine. But when it all seemed lost, like, what am I going to do? I bought the car on a Monday, and then Thursday I found out that the engine is not able, is basically junk. So yeah, so I had this pressure on me. I didn't know what to do with the car, all these things. What happened is I went to a soccer game. Both my sons are in soccer. Drove out to Macon, Georgia, and while I was out there, my wife was talking to another wife who talked to her husband. Her husband comes over to me. That's Anthony right here. He goes, "Hey, what's going on with your car?" And I was like, "Well, I bought a car. It's a turd. The engine, head gasket, all this stuff." He's like, "Well, why don't you just change the head gasket?" And I was like, "Yeah, why don't I just, hey, wait a minute. What do you mean?" We talked. He's like, "Well, you bring the car over, pay for the head gasket, which is about $200." He goes, "And I'll replace it for you." Oh my gosh, it was awesome. So I went over to his house. We got dirty. We ripped it all the way down to the block, as you can see here. I was really stressed out. I was panicked the entire time. I didn't really know this guy. Is this going to be how my car is going to be forever? All that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a couple of weeks. It took us because he worked, I worked. We had soccer on weekends, so it took us a couple of weeks to tear it all the way down and then put everything back. If you notice, if you know anything about cars, inside, deep inside the engine, this is where they put the starter. So if you're, yeah, that's like a really odd place to put starter. Usually it's on the outside. It's about a $25, $40 part that breaks, and it's easy to replace because it's on the outside. Not with Cadillac. They're going to put it right in the middle here, so it costs about $4,000 just to get to it. So yeah, while we're in there, we replaced the starter too. Um, anyway, again, it took us a few weeks, and the motor is back on track. It's been running ever since. I've put 33,000 miles on this engine since I got it fixed. Not so much this year. It's been sitting in my garage. I've been doing some modifications to it, but it's ready to roll once 2021 gets around, and we can do some safe driving. So, anyways, we brought it back from the dead. So we go getting a fresh little wash here, fresh wax. So thanks to Anthony Bagnoli, I bought the little statue here. Again, I'm a recovering Catholic, so Catholics do this kind of goofy stuff. They buy these little miniature patron saints, and they kind of have them around, give you good luck. So I bought the Saint Anthony here, who's the patron saint of poor and lost articles. Also, he is the patron saint of idiots who buy old and broken Cadillacs. Since I've had St. Anthony on the dashboard, the car has been running flawlessly. So I contributed that to my superstitious behavior. Anyway, so here's the car here. You and me and the DeVille makes three. So it's a 2016 to present. Here is the car covers, what I was talking about before with Gerd Ludwig. Here's how I create the car covers. So I have a hookup. I have a connection with the Lamar billboards right off of I-95. And they have stacks of this vinyl that they really don't want to throw out because it just goes into a landfill. So I try and find artists and creative people that can repurpose it. So I get this for free, which is a really nice piece of material. I lay it out like so. I put a color on top of it. Here's my son helping me with the stencil. So we're able to cut it out. And then here is what it looks like when it's on top of the car. So here's the Old English D on one side, along with the little devil, I mean. And then on the other side has a Cadillac signature. I did not set this picture up color-wise. It just sort of happened. So you have my son in his outfit. I guess he decided to wear yellow that day. He had the car cover as well as the basketball hoop in the background. So yeah, it's quite coordinated. Kind of happens that way. So I wrote some things on top, which is a recall. That was one of the things that was going on at that time with General Motors. Was several big recalls going on for their products, and it was causing some kind of little issues. So I think of my project here as a soft monument. So I'm able to move from space to space. I can change out the design. the car cover itself, the different color, different applications, different locations that I'm in, and it makes it really pliable. And also, I think of it as a mobile message board, so people are able to draw, put their handprint on there, scribble a little bit, add color to certain areas. They don't have to be an artist in order to connect with the piece, but I just think of this as a mobile message board. So people are able to write their messages on the car itself. This is at the Toledo Museum of Art. I had this courtyard dedicated to this performance that we're working on this day, and students came out and totally covered the entire car surface. Also went to Domaine Forget Sculpture Garden up in Quebec. So I bought a car that had a bad engine. I rebuilt the engine in a matter of a couple of weeks. And then I decided to take it on a 2,000-mile quest up to Quebec from where I'm at right now. So I look back at this and I was like, yeah, that's it's a little nuts. It held up fine. It was a fantastic, or it is a fantastic car, and it runs really well. So here's the Michigan Legacy Art Park. I went to a variety of different locations while I'm going on my trek. So I just wanted to show you a variety of different locations and how the surface of the car cover kind of evolved. So I was at the Denos Art Museum and also the Ewenig Museum of Cultural Center. This is in Traverse City or in Suttons Bay. And then finally the display. So the pieces, after they get to a certain point, how I tell if they're done or not, if people are continuously writing on it and it really doesn't get any more, it's kind of like snowfall. After it gets to a certain point, everything kind of starts to look the same. So as the surface is developed, there's a point where it just doesn't continue to make any more improvement. So I just kind of stop at that time. I'm able to take it off the vehicle, and then I get invited to different locations to post these or display these pieces. So here is Recall on the wall. Here's another one, is Running with the Devil. There's this car cover here. This is really a nice piece. Heads I Win, Tails You Lose. All these have a connection with a Native American experience. This is what I think about when I was traveling through the West or even going up into Quebec. There's different treaties. Even my reservation was going through a series of legal battles with treaties from 120 years ago. And it still seems to me like heads I win, tails you lose. You're always on the short end of that kind of exchange. Also, I remember my brother saying that too. I'm an older brother, and he would always say, "Head, want to flip for it?" I'll be like, "Yeah, sure." He's like, "Okay, heads I win, tails you lose." And he was like, "Well, you lose," or that kind of a thing. So that's what's kind of happening in my mind. But anyway, this is the heads I win, tails you lose car cover. I have a traveling sketchbook. I drive and I draw at the same time. I know that's not the most safest thing to do, but I do keep a journal. I draw and I kind of make notes as I'm going along. Driving for me is kind of like a meditation. So I'm able to kind of push around ideas, formulate things, organize, and I just have my sketchbook with me and I'm able to kind of draw things out. Then I'll stop off at a location, let's say at a hotel or wherever I'm staying, and I'm able to kind of lay things out and I can go back into those drawings and kind of put some more details into them. So this is one of my traveling sketchbooks here. And then here's another one too. This is a smaller version. I have a small version of a sketchbook and I have a little bit larger one. Larger one, obviously, I spend a little bit more time in. These I kind of doodle along and kind of push around ideas quickly. Here's other collaborative projects that I have going on. I use my Cadillac as a mobile art studio. So here's a film and music performance with a group here in town called the Glitter Chariot. They're based in Tallahassee, but they have a few band members here in Savannah. And also I work with them too. So we collaborate. We use the Cadillac as this kind of platform. We do a variety of different productions, especially out of the trunk of the car. I used to use you, me, and the devil kind of a thing, but in current political climate, devils seem to be a little too negative. So I kind of changed things a little bit. So I changed it to a mobile spiritual renewal center. I think that sounds a lot better, especially after 2016. Yeah, so I figured I would kind of have a little bit more of a positive kind of feel. So what people could do was, I'm sorry, for my next part of the project is I created this caution tape medicine wheel. And so I'd have the performance of the vehicle on one side, and I'd create this medicine wheel around the car itself. And then people could take different pieces of fabric or write prayers or positive thoughts onto those prayers, and then tie it to the caution tape. So I've kind of transformed the semi-negative caution tape, caution is semi-negative, by adding these kind of positive messages to it. And then would have this, over the years, I've collected thousands and thousands of these kind of positive messages. And then I can use this as a platform for exhibitions or scanning, and then kind of creating new pieces of artwork. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. And then also I have keep in touch. I'm really not on Twitter that much. But I am there. So I guess you can find me there. Instagram is Brother O. Facebook is my name. And then here's my website too. You can keep up with a variety of different projects that I have going on.
Great, great. Thank you very much.
Sure, no problem. I try to keep it relatively short. I hope that wasn't too short, but I just don't want to go a little too long. I just gave you guys a kind of a touch on a few things that I have going on. And then also, Stephen, if you wanted to, I could just kind of go through my website a little bit just to show you some of the things I've been doing more recently as far as COVID. And also, if anybody wants to go to my website, yeah, you guys can keep in touch. And if you have any questions or anything like that in the future, you can always make you can always send me a message.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind going through the website, and before we finish up, I'll talk about our exhibit of your work as well. But yeah.
Okay. So we have here's my website. Here's the gallery. Here's some of the wheel covers. I've been working on wheel covers in COVID. COVID has actually been really a time for me to be creative. I'm getting back into the studio. Normally, I would be traveling and doing a variety of different things. I mentioned before I have two sons, and both of them are in soccer, so it's constantly traveling. But with COVID, I was like, I got weekends to myself. This is really a strange thing. And so I can't go anywhere. I can't go out to eat. I can't do anything. I know all you guys know this, but it was like a really weird situation. And so I was like, so all of a sudden I started to calm down a little bit, from being amped up to doing all these things to, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to go into the studio and I have all these ideas I never got to. So I've been working with wheel cover designs for the Cadillac. So I have some of these pieces here for you to look at. And so it's just a way for me to take some of my sketchbook drawings, printing them out in a large format, and then being able to adhere them to these wheel covers, and then have them on the car itself. So they can be separate, they can be along with the car itself. I'm still building these things for a 2021. So when I go out into the world again, I'm able to have this really nice content and being able to really have some interesting projects here. Also, I was able to develop some drawings. Like these drawings here are based on my sketchbook. I still had, at the time, at the beginning of COVID, I still had access to some of the lab. We have wonderful labs here at Savannah College of Art and Design. So I was able to go into the lab and be able to scan. We have a large format scanner, which is absolutely wonderful. I'm very fortunate to have it. And then we also have a large format printers. And so I was able to go into the lab and print these out. So I scan my drawings, and then I'm able to print them out a large. So these are roughly, let's see, 19 by 24. So it's a little bit larger than obviously your sketchbook. And then I'm able to draw back into them. So I create these surfaces. I've been using stencils and spray paint, and kind of using a variety of different materials and coming up with a new body of work. So I have some of these for you to check out. Chicken is foreign. I also have some paintings here too. So again, these are pretty standard, and I've been doing image transfers, something that's very time consuming. So it's difficult to do when you have a full schedule. But when you're in COVID lockdown, you're like, oh, I can make a whole bunch of these things. And so, yeah, it's really time consuming, kind of labor intensive to make these kinds of image transfers. But it's great therapy when you're trying to keep it all together. So yeah, so I have Sherman here. Sherman, I think about the Confederate statues, especially in Savannah here. Yeah, William Tecumseh Sherman is not liked in Savannah. So I thought it'd be interesting if we actually made a, took down some of the Confederate iconography and put up William Tecumseh Sherman, because he did not burn down Savannah. So that was one of the few places he did not burn down. I lived in Jackson, Mississippi, where he did burn that down. And then I'm living here in Savannah, where he did not. Also, we have Ty Cobb, the Georgia peach. He's anything but a peach. he's a complicated character. So I did some image transfers to him. I did a variety of photographs. I was digging through all my photographs, and I have images of junkyards. So I was going to junkyards when I was working on the Cadillac. Actually, I still go to junkyards. I still have crappy cars, but I go to junkyards to pick up parts and things. And while I'm there, I take these photographs. So this right here is an image of some of those photographs I've taken and then made drawings based on them. So I have a few other little pieces here for you guys to look at. Here is the Cadillac. So just some pictures of me working on it, and yeah, some of the anxiety. Here's me driving, having a good time, vibing, Coca-Cola. And here's some automotive skins. I didn't get to them all, the ones that I've done. I tried to get to a few, but you get to see some. Here's your Andrew Jackson right here.
Yeah.
I went to the University of South Alabama. Or is it South? Yeah, University of South Alabama. Here's Heads I Win, Tails You Lose. So I've had a couple of exhibitions with them, as well as kind of traveling around with them and stuff. So here's me back in the day, a few years ago. Yeah, so I have some of those. Also, I have another a project car that I use is a Pontiac, Montana. Pontiac, Montana, or Pontiac's named after Chief Pontiac, and from the lovely city of Detroit area. He's a total badass. So I think it's kind of funny that I'm driving around in this unassuming minivan that has its name connected to this historical badass. So I think it's kind of funny. I giggle a little bit. But I used this for a project that I did. It was called Retracing the Footsteps of General Custer. And so I had this epiphany. I had this voice in my head. It told me that, because I was like thinking for days, like, what am I going to put on the side of this car? What should I put on the car skin? What should I do? That kind of a thing. And I had this voice in my head that said, hey, you know what you need to do? You need to put General George Armstrong Custer on the side of your minivan. And then you need to go to Montana. You need to go to the Battle of Bighorn. That's where you need to do. I was like, my God, that's the stupidest idea I've ever had. And so I kind of get back, crunch myself back into the pillows and go back to sleep. And then the next night, this voice wakes me up again. It tells me all of this. It's like an old cat. It's like an old cat coming into your room, like waking you up and stuff like that. I was like, oh God, this is terrible. Finally, by I think the third or fourth night, I woke up, I got out of bed, I drew all this stuff out, and then I went on this trek. So this was in 2014 and also 2015. I drove out to Montana, and I connected with a variety of different Native American folks, different reservations, different colleges. I went to a Sitting Bull College, did a whole performance there. And I told them when I stopped in, I was like, all right, everybody. I told them about this voice that I had in my head. I said, I'm supposed to be here. I said, I have children. I said, if you don't like what I'm doing, you can take the skin off if you want to, take it over to the field there and set it on fire. I don't mind. But I said, please don't smash the windows or cut the tires or anything like that, because I have to get home. And they all laughed. Everybody laughed. I put it on. They're like, oh. And then they ended up cutting out his eyes. You can see here, he has his little eyes cut out. So this is the different trek that I took out west. It's a variety of different people I had working on the car cover itself. Yeah, and it was really an interesting kind of piece. It really made me nervous, but it's funny. This fear was only in my head. For you creative people that are out there, the fear is in your head. I went out and I did all these things, and I was surprised that what I had built up in my mind really doesn't exist. It was only upstairs. The other thing too is I was going to here, this Custer monument that's in Monroe, Michigan. And I had a friend of mine from high school. So he lives in the area. I called him up and I was like, hey, I'm going to be in town. Do you want to go with me? I have to go to this Custer monument. I'm going to take some photographs. You want to go with me? He was like, yeah, sure. So anyway, we're driving over to the monument. And I said to him, I said, all right, Kelly. I said, well, I've noticed when I stop and put this car cover on the car, people come up and start talking to me. And I didn't realize that, but I think when we get there, people are going to come up and talk to us. So if it happens, just go with it. Don't worry about it. And I know he was in the passenger seat thinking, yeah, listen to this artist guy. Yeah, listen to this guy here. He thinks he's like, ooh, he's Mr. Important. He's got some delusions of grandeur. I know that's what he was thinking. I could see it in his face. Then I'm like driving along. We get there. No sooner did I put this car cover on, this car, you can hear the tires squeal because he hit the brakes. And this guy comes whipping into this area here, and he was from the Custer Historical Museum. He saw my car and he came up to me and started talking to me. And I could see my friend's face changed. He's like, man, you're not kidding. I was like, yeah, I'm serious. People just come up and start talking to me. But anyway, this person from the Historical Museum, never met him before in my life, took me on a tour of Monroe, Michigan, showed me all of the historical spaces where General George Armstrong Custer hung out, took me to the Custer graveyard, or the patch of where everyone is buried and laid. He took me out for breakfast, bought me an omelet and coffee and orange juice, and just gave me all of this information. It was probably about maybe a 4-hour kind of event, which was absolutely incredible. I mean, I was writing down stories that this guy is telling me about and stuff like that. So Kelly and I got back into the car, and he's like, huh, you're not kidding. I was like, I told you, I put the thing on and people started coming out of the woodwork. So yeah, that was a really interesting kind of experience. The other one, 2 years, I have wheel covers from back in 2015. These were really floppy. These were a part of the material I was using for car covers. It's nice vinyl, but I didn't like the fact that it was so yeah, kind of flimsy. And also at the time, I was kind of in a rush to do things. But now it's like COVID, right? So now I can take time. I can cut these out. I can print them. I can put them up in the studio space. I can look at them. I can make some adjustments. I can take them down, put them back up a couple weeks later, and kind of work on them some more. So it's a really nice experience with being able to slow down a little bit and being able to look at the work.
Yeah,
All right. How are we doing on time?
We're good. I couldn't help but notice the Bill Cosby coming soon sign.
Yeah, when you take photographs, you don't know what's going to be funny. You know?
Yeah, that one didn't quite hold up the same way.
At the time, I was just taking photographs, just click, 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 and then a couple of years later, you're going through your images. You're like, wow, that's pretty hilarious. Not that I'm promoting Bill Cosby or anything like that. I'm just saying it's kind of odd.
Interesting coincidence. We have a couple of questions in the chat, and then we'll open it up to folks who want to chime in. Let's see, a lot of comments and a request to see more of the wheels. So I think we satisfied that request. Here's one. Is there ever a time when you feel really uninspired to make a piece? And if so, how do you deal with that?
No. I mean, here's some sketchbooks. I'm constantly working. I don't think there is a day that I don't work. You know, so I have the sketchbooks here, and these things are in constant production. And I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, these things are in constant production. I have ideas constantly rolling through my head. For young creative people, what I would say is figure out what you like to do as far as digital or like analog. I still do analog sketchbooks just because that's what I grew up with. I'm dabbling with Adobe. I'm dabbling with, they have wonderful platforms. Adobe Fresco is fantastic. But for me, I'm still using these kind of sketchbooks. I do these every single day. Ideas are constantly going on in this brain of mine, and I'm writing them out. The other thing that I've learned is do not discriminate against good and bad ideas. Make sure that you write down the bad ideas. That's what I have my students do. We are constantly doing brainstorming, mind mapping kind of techniques, and we're always trying to develop our ideas. So make sure that you write down the bad ideas too. You never know, a couple of bad ideas put together becomes a pretty good idea. Also you make some money off that. So so you don't discriminate. Also write in the journal like nobody's reading it. It doesn't matter. Make sure that it goes from your brain into that page, brain to page, whether it's digital or analog, it doesn't matter. But start collecting your data. Start collecting, and collecting. Start collecting today. Start collecting right now. See, I can look at images from 20 years ago, and I can scan those images. Now, I didn't know what I was doing with those images 20 years ago. I was just drawing. I don't know, just kind of trying to figure stuff out. But now all of a sudden, years later, technology is in such a way, I was like, oh, well, I can take this image, I can scan it, and then print it out on a variety of different surfaces. And then from there, I have artwork. So I have an abundance of data that I can climb into and really move around. Yeah, there's some days I don't feel like doing certain things, just like everybody. You have off days. Well, those off days, I just try and do something else. But the majority of the time, if not all the time, I'm into something. Whether it's one of these little drawing sketches that I have here. These are constant. And then I scan them, and I have a whole other world I can dive back into them.
A couple of references here. I think they're from my colleague, Professor Heinemann Priest, about the film Powwow Highway. Are you familiar with the movie?
Not sure.
It's I guess it's from the late '80s, Claudia.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it's a Native American road movie, basically. It involves I can't remember the make of the car. I think it's a Pontiac. That one of the main characters buys off a lot, and it becomes sort of a symbol in the film. It's A. Martinez and I'm going to draw a blank on Gary Farmer. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good movie, and for its time particularly. No, it's a Buick Wildcat, apparently from 1989. But let's open up other questions. If you have other questions, I think at this point, just unmute yourself and ask. Everyone's going to be shy.
Oh, that's okay. Well, I'm going to look up that film. The next time I see you, I'll have it. I'll have it watched.
I have a question. Have you looked into? I mean, maybe it's obvious, but why it is that so many cars have Native American names? It's a sort of with tobacco products. I get that. I get the connection there, but why do we have so many Native named cars?
I have no idea. I think it's about as American as you can get, maybe. Yeah. So there's like a connection to land there, and or maybe it's the sense of adventure or the sense of the wild. I don't know, something like that. And it's there is a certain mystique or kind of there's this romantic kind of component, I think, in the larger cultural sense with Native Americans. So yeah, I think there's definitely some kind of connection that's there.
It's an interesting phenomenon. I just wonder, be interesting to look into where that started and why it is so prevalent. Other questions? Let's see. Check the chat. Okay. Well, let me, before we finish up, I did want to take a minute that we need to thank OceanaGold, the Hale Gold Mine, for their support for our Native American Studies Week, as well as USC Lancaster and USC's Palmetto College for their ongoing support. If you look in the chat there, you'll see, you have to scroll up a little bit, a link to, here we go. So if you scroll up to 3:34 p.m., there's a link here for an online exhibit of Chris's and Tom Ferris's work. Tom Ferris will be joining us at noon tomorrow and at 7 p.m. on Thursday. He'll talk about his work tomorrow and do an interactive painting on Thursday. There it is. It's now back up again. So the last entry there, if you'll click onto that, that's the online exhibit prepared by Professor Brittany Taylor-Driggers. I was looking over it earlier. It's quite visually captivating, and the works look great in it. And there's some discussion, explanation of some of the work as well. It looks great, and I would encourage you all to take a look at it. In fact, here it comes. All right.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. So I think this is our first foray into, or wait, I guess second foray into online exhibits, and I think Professor Taylor-Driggers, like the rest of us, is quickly becoming proficient in technology that we, I know I have avoided using for a while, but sort of necessity has lent itself to this, and this is, I think, looks great. It helps that the works are amazing as well. So,
yeah, I think all of us have been thrown into technology because at the beginning of my fall term, I never really thought of myself being videotaped like we're doing right now. And yeah, it was really kind of a little nervous, a little shaky at the beginning. But yeah, within a couple of weeks working with students and things and working on projects and demonstrations and all that, all of a sudden it becomes second nature. So there are some good things from the COVID that's happening. And I think being able to communicate like this, being able to communicate around the world, where I know we had the tools before, but we didn't necessarily utilize them. Where now it's like, oh, okay, well, I can always have a Zoom, or I can go ahead and kind of have these kinds of conversations. And then also the audience is a part of it too. Where I think before, let's say 2019, 2018, if we did something like this, maybe a few people would watch it. But now all of a sudden it's like it's much broader as far as the entire ecosystem being able to interact like this.
And the reach as well, being able to much further beyond the physical space. But it is, and I appreciate your talk, because I know being on that side of a presentation, it's a little strange not to have audience reaction, and you kind of are talking to a vacuum, and you make a joke and you go, oh, I wonder if that was funny.
Yeah, well, that's how it is with my students. I can see some of them kind of like looking around or whatever. They might like the joke, but I'm not quite sure if it actually hit or not.
Well, all right. So any other questions or comments before we wrap things up? I believe we've got one. Claudia, is that a thumbs up or is that a hand raise?
That's just a thumbs up. I think that it was really awesome, and I really do regret that we couldn't do that Powwow Highway thing with that car. And I've been trying to go around to junkyards to find that Buick Wildcat, but I haven't had any luck. So, Chris, if you have any luck in your junkyard searches, we would still love to do something with it.
Yeah. Well, this stuff is going to be over with before we know it, and we'll be able to get back to some kind of sense of normal. Doing collaboration, I'll be more than happy to do something. Yeah, we could definitely talk about connecting, doing some kind of project on campus or in the area. Yeah, we can definitely work on something.
Well, we've talked about this. I would love to take you over to the Catawba Reservation, work with the kids over there, and maybe a Jackson themed car cover that we might take out to Andrew Jackson Park and see if we can't get in a little trouble.
Yeah, that sounds good. Who get people throwing bottles at the car?
Have you? I meant to ask you earlier. Have you thought about doing this rather than the car cover, painting directly onto a car, to create like an art car?
Oh, yeah, I've thought about that. I thought about putting vinyl on the car itself, and then I could peel it off. That's one of the things that I'm working with. I have so much material between you and I have so much material that I've been using. I've been using the car covers just because it's kind of there. It's free. Yeah. It fits my needs. But I do like the idea of putting the vinyl on the car. You can get it relatively cheap now.
Yeah.
And you can even, you have the technology to be able to print on it relatively inexpensively. And so, yeah, there's some modifications I would like to do to the car, possibly having it where the hood would have the design on it. Now I could still put the car cover over it for, let's say, drawing and doing different things. But when I take the car cover off and I'm driving in space, I could have that kind of design, that kind of modification on there. Because the car really, to be honest with you, it's kind of a boring Cadillac.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity. I was looking at these Cadillacs. I saw one that was a 1996 Hearst that had the 6 doors on it, so it was extra long. And I was doing something in Montreal. I'm like, how the heck am I ever going to be able to park that thing in Montreal? There's no way. The thing was about 27 feet long, and oh my gosh, it would have been. Now I look back, I kick myself. I should have went and got that one. I could have put like a hot tub. You could put little tubs in there in the middle, take all the seats out and put like a tub. I thought that would be pretty cool. I've also looked, when I was looking at cars too, I was looking at like the late 70s. Here in the South, you can get a good late 70s car that's not rusted out and still in good shape. And so, yeah, I think when I move on to the next kind of art car, I'm going to get something that's a little bit more iconic. And then now that I have a little bit better mechanical skills, I'll be able to kind of build that up too. So I can take on the challenges.
Yeah. The whole art car phenomenon is just a really interesting intersection of folk art and pop art, and I think there's this fits in with that sort of genre and then doesn't, and I think it's an interesting parallel though, what the sort of folks using their cars for creative expression, usually individual expression rather than the more sort of socially conscious work. I think you're doing a little.
Yeah.
But it's a fascinating genre of art. There's a question here before we finish up. Ever thought about traveling the Black Hills with your art?
Yeah, I went through there.
Okay.
Yeah, I took George Armstrong Custer through the Black Hills. I spent the night in Custer. Oh God, I felt so. Anyway, yeah. I did an artist residency in Wyoming, so that was one of the times that I drove out, and then I ended up making my way to like Boise, no, not Boise, Bozeman, and kind of going through Yellowstone. And I have these old junky cars, by the way, so it's much more interesting when you have an old junky car. You never know when it's going to overheat. You don't know if it's going to make it. Yeah, so there's a certain amount of danger that's there. It's like, crap, man, I got to work on this car kind of a thing. So you got to kind of have to keep it going. There's a certain amount of tinkering that you have to do to the car to keep it going down the road. The Cadillac that I have just loves oil, loves heat. And so you constantly have to just make sure all of the fluids are where they're supposed to be. It runs great, but there's certain things you just have to kind of be able to handle it as it's going down the road. It'd be different if I had like a rental car and I could just get in it. I wouldn't even think about it and drive along. Your shirt doesn't smell, that kind of a thing. So it just doesn't have that same kind of flavor.
Definitely get the insurance though. We had a question from our co-director, Dr. Brooke Bauer. Brooke.
Hi, Chris. Brooke Bauer. First of all, thank you for your talk. It was really fascinating, and I enjoyed hearing about your travels. I guess one of the questions, or the question that I have for you is, have you actually set up one of these cars with the skin within the Chippewa community or any other Native communities?
Yeah. For the past few years. Now, also I get invited. I just want to make sure that that's clear. I get invited when I do go to locations. So when I went to Standing Rock and I hung out there for a few days, I was invited. So I didn't just kind of show up. Hey, everyone, how's it going? That kind of a thing.
Right.
So going through Canada, my reservation. Going up and getting support from family and kind of seeing what I'm doing, as well as getting feedback. Yeah.
Great. I mean, I find this really interesting, and especially in how our youth can participate.
Yeah, and here's the genesis of the idea. is I was making artwork, just like a lot of other artists. You know, I'm sitting there making paintings. I'm trying to get the work into a white cube gallery, and you know, kind of on that grind. Also, I was in an institution before I came to SCAD that was a tenure track kind of place. So I was really on the grind as far as trying to build my my packet.
Mhm.
You know, and to be honest with you, my work was really kind of lifeless, because I was like trying to do this certain kind of quote unquote art thing. And once I got here to SCAD, I'm at an art school. No more grind. I don't have, between you and I, they really don't care if I make artwork or not. You know, so I could take 2 or 3 years, let's say, to write a book. Nobody cares. You know, I could take 2 or 3 years and really hone my skills. I could take 2 or 3, 5 years, and at the end of 5 years have an exhibition, and also that they provide financial support to me. And so, anyway, so there was a shift that happened to me when I moved to Savannah here. I was like, oh, you mean I don't have to make this stuff? Well, what is it that I want to do? And so that's why I made a list of things. One was travel. I like driving around. I love talking. I love meeting people. And then also, how can I get artwork to underrepresented communities? You know, so these kinds of things were kind of playing around in my head. So I was like, So then I started, you know, with the car. That's the first one was the No Place for the Week, and kind of driving out and getting a test for that. I started that in 2011, and 2012 is when I went on the trip. So I came back and I was like, this is really interesting. I'm able to use this as a platform to do a variety of different things from. Yeah, it's got codes of high art. You know, yeah, I can have a museum show or some kind of square cube gallery kind of a thing. Sure, no problem. But I can also do these other things too, just like what you mentioned, is talking to the youth. You know, when I went to Toledo with a program that they have going on there with youth, it's like, yeah, these are people's opportunity to make a connection and be creative. Maybe if it is for just a couple of hours, you know, but having that kind of experience. And I think that's more beneficial to me as a creative person than, let's say, making a painting, put it into a square cube gallery kind of a thing, maybe selling it, maybe getting it back to my house, which just cost me a bunch of cash just to go on a little trip, you know, that kind of a thing. But yeah, I really kind of using this as a platform. And that's why with this COVID, I've been thinking about, well, okay, what are the next steps that I want to do with this? And maybe later on, when we got more time, we can sit down and chat about some of these other crazy ideas that I have. But yeah, I got a whole bunch of stuff going on.
That's great. Like I said, I really enjoyed this talk.
Oh, thank you very much, Brooke. It was great meeting you.
Thank you.
Hopefully after the COVID stuff, I can stop up there. Maybe even on my travels anyway, just stopping in just to say hi. Doesn't have to
That
be
would be
anything.
great.
Please do.
formal.
Let us know when you're coming through. We'll
It's going to be a while.
yeah.
It doesn't look like this COVID's going anywhere for a little bit.
No, but when you get up this way, we'll feed you barbecue.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I need.
There you go. All right. Well, we're run past 4, so I think
Oh, are we?
Unless there are any urgent questions, I'm sure Chris wouldn't mind if you reach out to him via email or through his webpage as well. If you need those links or any further information about Chris and his work, if you can't reach him, contact us and we'll be happy to help you. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you for the presentation. I want to thank everybody else here for joining us. And hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow at noon. So thanks a lot.
All right, fantastic. We'll see you.
Bye-bye. Take care.